That was some powerful intro music there, Mr. Andy Hoar. Welcome, everyone, to Master B2B, the world's, or well, actually, the galaxy's leading thought leadership series and community of B2B e-commerce practitioners. My name is Brian Beck. We're here today to talk about digital maturity. I am thrilled to be joined by Andy Hoar, longtime Silicon Valley veteran, former VP of e-commerce B2B at Forrester, CEO of Paradigm B2B. Andy, got an awesome topic today. Welcome.
Yeah, no, this is going to be great, actually. Well, they're all great, but this one's sort of special. It's not another webinar, it's a webcast, and we're going to do interviews. So slightly different format, which we'll talk about in a moment. For those of you who don't know Brian, though, Brian is a 20-year industry veteran. He's been a practitioner, both as a B2C side with PacSun, the B2B side with Harbor Freight Tools. He's been a consultant. He wrote a book called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce. And I always forget to mention this. He's a managing partner at Insiba, which is an Amazon shop that helps people learn to sell better on Amazon. So, Brian, when do you have any free time? That's ridiculous.
I don't sleep. It's all good. No, it's fun, Andy, because these topics are all interwoven. And today we're going to talk about digital maturity. And in fact, marketplaces and Amazon's part of the overall model. So we'll get into that later. Folks, this is a webcast. We're not debating, but we are going to have some spirited discussions today. We have some fabulous folks who are coming on to comment on digital maturity, some folks who are way down the path and who've learned a lot along the way. We want to hear from you, though, so please put your comments, questions into the Q&A box as we go through our session today. And by the way, this will also all be recorded, so you can watch it and share it with your friends and colleagues throughout the galaxy afterwards. So,
why the galaxy today, Brian? Is this
you saw the intro.
Galactic?
Yeah, we were light warp speed.
I get
Whatever
it.
it's called. Yes,
Sure, that makes sense.
Exactly. So, we have four dimensions in our digital maturity tool. We did some research, and Andy, I know you want to orient us a little bit towards this. This is a maturity model. We got to ask these questions all the time, Andy. Where am I in my digital maturity? What do I do next? And this is our attempt to help practitioners solve for this and figure out how do they close the gaps? But go ahead. Why don't you describe the model for everyone here before we get into it?
Yeah, so about 2-3 months ago, we released some, we think, kind of cutting edge research around digital maturity models for B2B companies. And, we spent months actually talking with people. We did interviews. We did 2 large scale surveys. It wasn't like we made this up. We did a lot of homework around creating a maturity model, plus drawing upon you and I, a decade plus of experience. And we wanted to do something that we thought was different. And we wanted to be practical and actionable in terms of its advice. It wasn't a theoretical model. We wanted to produce a model that people could sink their teeth into and literally score themselves on, which is something we're going to do today. We're going to show you our panelists' actual scores for their respective dimensions here. But at a high level, digital tools is really about the technology infrastructure. The team culture is about the people, the team you hire. Customer experience is about what your customers see and what your partners see as well. It's the experience they'll have. And then last but not least is the data and insights, which increasingly powers all this stuff, because if you've got bad data, you're not going to have a very good customer experience. So we're going to bring on somebody in each one of these areas and at various stages of maturity and have a conversation with them and talk to them about why they scored where they did and what they're going to do next to move forward.
Yeah, Andy, our guests today have just some of them, all of them have tremendous experience with this, and there's learnings all on the way. So, we brought this research to market in partnership with commercetools, and we have a special co-host today. Want to go ahead and bring her onto the screen. Ashley, our special guest host, is the Senior Solutions Engineer from commercetools, Ashley Von Kluck. Ashley, welcome to the webcast today. We're excited to have you join us.
Thank you both. I'm very glad to be here. And, at commercetools, we're really excited to be partnering with you all on this. And from a research perspective, being a part of this webcast, thanks for having us. We really decided to work with Master B2B because we hadn't seen any maturity models out there that related specific to B2B, nor were they actionable if they did exist. So this is really both. It's practical, it's prescriptive, and I'm really excited to speak with our panelists today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Ashley. Well, we're glad you're here with us, and thank you for working with us on this. So Andy, this is let's get a little bit more into each of these stages or dimensions that we talk about, and let's describe them a bit so that folks know. We have these 4 stages and each one is sort of a measure of where you are in your maturity. But why don't we start with stage one? How do you know you're at stage one?
Well, I should mention, by the way, there's a companion guide that goes with this that we are going to make available to everybody who registered today. So you'll get a copy of it if you haven't got one already, that actually details all this and provides some of that advice. So this is just a kind of a flyover of what's in the report itself. So stage one, well, I think we're all familiar with stage one. These tend to be companies that are still a little bit afraid of e-commerce and digital. There may be some channel conflict internally. They struggle to prioritize their digital investments. They still tend to see data as a cost center, which is something that you eventually get over. It's not a cost center. It's an opportunity to drive personalization and practical recommendations.
Yep.
And then many of these folks are just not selling online currently, or if they are, they're doing so in kind of a minimalist way. So that's kind of stage one.
Mm-hmm.
So stage two is a step up from that. And these are people who have probably hired somebody from the outside because they realize that there's a lot of change management associated with digital maturity. And oftentimes somebody internally, for a lot of reasons, can't make that change happen. So they tend to bring people in from the outside who might have a small team. They're moving forward on their technology stack. It's not so much an old system they built in-house. It's legacy and modern systems, kind of a combo of the two. This is what we found in our research. Data is still mostly siloed, but at least it's not the enemy. And they're starting to kind of realize there's a driver here behind a lot of this stuff. And then lastly, the sales teams have started to embrace customer desires and the omni-channel experience. And we're going to go into some detail about this in the interview. So that's stage two. Those are both still on the starter intermediate side of things. Then stage 3 and 4 go from starter to between intermediate and advanced. So in terms of a maturity model, which obviously implies maturity, you have people going from stages, but also qualitatively, they're reaching different milestones. So now we're on the intermediate side of things, heading to advanced. Stage 3, as you'll see, is kind of a step forward here. It's a step up. Large groups of the organization understand that they're contributing directly to the larger digital success. And as a result of that, there's buy-in that starts to take place. Not as much as needs to be, but before, maybe there are people fighting one another. In stage 3 company, they tend to be sort of buying in. They have mostly modern technologies. They're operating hopefully in real time, taking steps toward AI. You can kind of see where this is going. The data is cleaner. And they're starting to see that, hey, this one-on-one engagement thing is real and it can drive things. And it's omni-channel. So this is stage 3. And then for these very rare occasions, you'll find the stage 4. It's not an aspirational thing, but in some cases it sort of is. And there will be a stage 5 at some point, but where we are right now is stage 4. And this is very, very important. And these companies, we see this almost uniformly. The CEO himself or herself and the C-suite is actually driving and executing the strategy. This is really important. You're not going to be a stage 4 company with the CEO and the C-suite sitting on the sidelines and golf clapping the digital strategy, but not willing to make the hard decisions. Mm-hmm. Business owners here are leveraging kind of low-code and no-code tooling. And they've got clean data. Again, not everybody's got this. And you'll find when we get there that the data insights one is the one that's probably the most skewed toward starter and intermediate, because that's in many cases the hardest things to do. The technology is scalable technology and integrated with critical systems of record. Again, this is a lot about harnessing data. And the last thing is, these companies have to be real time. You have to operate in real time in a real time world. You can't have batched processing for pricing or availability. And it requires the technology to do that. And very importantly, they're really starting to anticipate buyer needs. And they're presenting buyers things almost prescriptively, like, oh, you bought this several months ago. Our data shows that you're out of this. Again, this can all be done in an automated way, which is very cost effective and very helpful for buyers. So that's kind of the overview here. I mean, there's a lot more detail. We spent a lot of time on this. The document's 25 pages long, but we're giving you the flyby here.
But it's a practical tool, Andy, and I think we'll hear that from our our folks who are joining us today. But, sort of before we get started, we do want to know what you think the most important dimension is. So we're going to throw up a quick poll here and go ahead and vote on that while we're waiting for that. Andy, I'm looking at who's joining, and it's really
just one quick point about this.
Yeah.
You can't do everything. Obviously, you have to spin a bunch of plates. Sure. But the reason we're asking this question is because you do have to sort of decide what's the most important thing to you. And so we were just curious among the people watching this right now, what does kind of jump out as the most important? You can only select one. Okay, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, that's okay. But I was just looking at the list of people who were registered for this. I mean, clearly there's a demand or interest in assessing this for folks. I mean, Andy, you see some of the folks who joined us and commented ahead of time on LinkedIn and other things. Who are you seeing doing the voting and coming into our session today?
Yeah, so we've got Shanna Boyd from Toyota Material Handling. Those guys, Don Blevins from Constellation Brands, Ryan Wiedemann, our friend there from Uline.
Uline, okay, yeah, see him.
Also another friend, Kevin Eaton from Samsung. So
that's awesome.
We're talking about different companies at different sizes and different stages of maturity, because that's the one thing about a maturity model. It's relevant to everybody.
No, it is. Yeah, I'm seeing Zebra here. I'm seeing 3M, Traffic Safety Warehouse. One Concierge here. Looks like Andy, our first guest, brought a contingency. Kimball Midwest also is here. Julie from Chamfer. Hey, Julie, I see you're here. Konica Minolta. So it's a great group here, guys. I think as we get into this, so we appreciate you all coming in. So why don't we go ahead and let's go ahead and dig in, Andy. Well, our first dimension, and we can figure out what dimension this gentleman lives in, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Dimension one is digital tools. The key question here is, how much is the organization taking advantage of digital tools in their business and to improve the customer experience? And our first guest to comment on this section or this dimension of the maturity model is none other than Andy Sweet G Goodfellow. Andy Sweet G Goodfellow is the CTO of Zorro. Andy, welcome to the webcast here. We're excited to have you back. You've been a contender on our on webinars in the past, and you fought the good fight, even in the live stage. And I don't remember if you won or not. You were David or Goliath, but anyway, welcome to the webcast.
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we won, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think you're on Andy's team and you crushed me. I seem to remember that. All right, so we need a quick reaction from you. So let's first go to your scores and figure out how you did. So those of you who don't know Zorro is a leader, billion-dollar company, division of Grainger, and a significant player in the industry. You guys have been investing for a long time in digital, right, Andy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have been. Yep, for a long time. Yeah, I joined a little bit over 5 years ago, but Zorro's been running strong for more than 10 years now.
And you've more than doubled the business from what you told me. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since when I started as about $500 million business. Now we're over $1 billion business. So,
okay. Yep. So this is a nearly perfect score, folks.
And an outlier, by the way. Nobody else gets these scores. So
this is Andy. This is Mr. Double. This is his Sweet G. This is your retirement plan or something. I don't know. Why even keep working with these scores? Oh my gosh! Inventory and availability, you're at a 4, which means that you're shipping all inventory locations. You're shipping robustly. Pricing transparency. Order status, you got a 3. We'll dive into that in a minute. Digital marketing, 4. Personalization, 4. Site search, 4. Core technology, 4. Andy, how did you get to this place? You have a lot to teach us, I think.
Yeah, well, it took a lot of time and effort and really talented folks. But what I'd say is, we're digital first. Like we were born in the cloud. We're an e-commerce play. So this is the stuff we need. And so we've pretty much gone through each of these and more to really develop our abilities in digital tooling to basically help add value to our customer, also our team members too, but that also adds value to our customer. But this is all about our customer. Our customer needs to understand availability. So we have our own availability software that we built and leverage across our assortment to give them good insights into finding the right product. And then we have good price transparency. Like the price is the price. We have the right product and the right price. What the customer sees is the price. Whatever discounting we apply, things like that, that's all readily available. So everything is super transparent. We use tons of digital tools for marketing and search and all of our core stuff obviously is all digital because we're all in the cloud. So we need to be super advanced in order to kind of function at the level of scale that we function at with our assortment size, with the amount of traffic we get. Like it's a thing. If we didn't have the digital tooling, we couldn't scale to the size that we scale at right now, much less aspire to in the future. So it's a thing. I would say digital tools are a thing for us.
So I do have to ask about your order status. You're 1 point away from perfect here.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, the interesting thing there is, number one, I kind of graded us down a little bit because we don't do things like text messaging to our customers and things like that. Also, we have a really large supplier base, right? Thousands of suppliers. So how to track all those orders from different suppliers, that's a challenge that, remains a challenge and will probably be a lifetime kind of problem for us to solve for. So I don't know that we ever get to like the tippy top of the advanced scale with that, just because we have different suppliers that are at different maturity, places themselves. So okay. Whatever we can interface with, as mature as they are, we will. But some of them are just not gonna have that level of maturity, so we won't ever get there all the way. It'll be a problem that we'll have probably forever.
So one more point, and then it's off to relax on a beach on an island somewhere. Excellent. Actually, you've seen all those lots of. At commercetools, you guys see a lot of different things, a lot of different instances. What do you see? What are you seeing with regard to these kinds of tools, and particularly this particular dimension? What examples do you have?
Yeah, and I'd say this transformation to digital tools and infrastructure, it doesn't happen overnight. And right. Although we have a perfect score here by Andy Sweetjee,
almost.
I think that is definitely an outlier. They've done a remarkable job, but I think it's important to remember that you can experiment, you can start small. You don't have to have an army of developers or the A team always to prove things out, but it helps. And, Andy's team really built out their initial MVP with an actual business problem. And I think that's the beauty with also having a composable commerce architecture underneath that allows you to really test out these different tools and see what sticks.
Interesting. Andy, and actually, thank you, Ashley, for that, because it raises another quick question I have for Andy. That's not you, Hoar, the other one. Sweetjee. I'm just going to call you Sweetjee. Okay, so you've been down this path. You've taken this business. You've freaking doubled it, right? You almost perfect score. Oh my gosh. Where do you start? Okay, so you're you now at a company that's not here, that's at zeros or ones on these. Where do you start? How do you start?
I would even say when I started at Zoro, we were at this place that you're talking about now, even though we were born in the cloud. So if you think about IT in general or technology as a cost center, or you think about how do I avoid risk, IT or technology is a risk for me, so I need to be risk avoidant. That is a mindset that needs to change. And I think that's where you start. Okay. So how do I look at technology, digital tools, that whole kind of sphere of things we're talking about as something that I can use to add value for my customer, right? Mm-hmm. And if I can leverage the tooling or the technology or my approach to it, and I can think about that in a different way as something that will create value for my customer, then you start to think about how I invest my technology, how I invest in the talent around technology, and then you start thinking different. At this point in time, the technology is moving so fast that you really have to pivot your thinking pretty quickly because the technology will just move all the competitors ahead on the field. So I think it starts with a mind shift change, and then because of that mind shift change, you start thinking about how you invest differently in people, processes, and technology.
Okay, so let's assume we get that mind shift change done. What's the first thing you tackle here? Are there things that stand out to you here? Like, what is the near term? If you're you 5 years ago now,
yeah,
it makes sense. What dimension we're working in here? Thank you, Andy. What would you start with? Like, what's the place to go first?
Well, I would think whatever helps my customer, right? Like I go back to what creates value for the customer. And if you look at this list, there's things that clearly create value for the customer. So if you can personalize your site so that it's relevant to the customer, start with that, right? Whether it's search, because customers are definitely using search online, that's their primary interface, right? Yep. But if you think about it from a customer perspective, if my customer is searching for gloves and I can give them the right kind of gloves, like if they're a dentist, I should be showing them disposable gloves, not like cut resistant gloves necessarily, because that's probably for more of a mechanic or a machinist, right? So Start there, invest in something that brings value to your customer. Then your customer will help you because they'll purchase more, obviously, and generate revenue, and you can invest more. So that's where I would suggest you start with what creates value for your customer first.
Putting the customer first. Yep. It's hard to find a product by navigating amongst your 13 million, right? You need a good search.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Well, Andy, that's wonderful. Thank you for your comments and for joining us today. I think we're up on time and we need to move on to our next guest. But Andy, thank you for everything and your thoughts, and congratulations on getting a wonderful score here. You are a light in our industry. Excellent work.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. All right. Now it's time for Dimension 2. Andy, we're going right to Dimension 2. Let's. Excellent. All right. Well, we got to move on to Dimension 2. Dimension 2 is team culture. How much is the organization embracing digital from an organizational perspective? How much have they hired for digital tool roles, and how much has the sales team embraced the shift to digital? That is the biggest one, I think.
Not much.
Yeah, that's a big one, man. That's a big one. All right, Andy, you're going to host this one. So why don't you go ahead and introduce our folks we have here on this dimension?
Yeah, so really thrilled to have Teresa Kuski, the Maverick, Digital Marketing Director at Ergodyne. She's also been on before, so she's a repeat guest. So she passed the test. In fact, Teresa, you sort of spawned some of this discussion among us internally about doing this actual webcast, because you said that you took the test, unbeknownst to us, and it had such an impact on your thinking as an organization that you took it to your management team, and now it's gained some currency internally. So we're going to want to talk about that. But first, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about it.
All right,
what does Ergodyne do? What does Ergodyne do? You need to know what Ergodyne is.
So tell us what Ergodyne does.
We're a safety manufacturer in Minnesota. So we develop safety gear from hard hats, safety glasses, gloves, knee pads, etc., making tenacious work gear for over 40 years.
Okay, so what does Brian do? All right, we'll skip that.
Nothing. No, I don't know.
All right, so let's go to your scores. Feel like an Olympic judge here. So let's go to the scores. So, all right, so you guys eked out a stage 3. Again, there's no right or wrong here. And you cheated a little bit.
1.5.
I made my own rules.
All right, so let's talk about the highs and the lows. First of all, this is team culture. There are a lot of dimensions of this. Every issue we ever talk about in B2B commerce always comes back to change management and the team. You saw what we said in the intro about stage 4 is driven by the CEO. That's a very difficult thing to attain. But we've not seen any successful stage 4 companies where the CEO isn't 100% on board. But let's talk a little bit about, let's go first for the things you've done well. So it looks like profitability expectations is something that you guys have hit the mark on. Tell us a little bit more about why you scored so high there.
We scored high mostly because we have adopted more of a composable commerce tech stack. So when we replatformed off of Magento, we kind of moved into more of an open source model, but that allowed us to build out our tech stack to the best of the breed with some of the solutions from shipping, tax, search, especially has been we work with a very good partner there and have really exponentially increased the experience overall from a search perspective. So yeah, I think overall we've done very well from that profitability. That kind of goes into our development process too, where on my team, we manage our development and have UX designer and web designers in-house. And so I think that really has also streamlined our effectiveness in integrating UX and really building out a very quick agile flow in our sprint process that we can move pretty quickly. Even being a small team and a small company, we have lots of priorities and things to get done. So, but it really allows us to just some news today of like, hey, we need to make this change to our shipping, and now we've got to move on that, and we can do that because of our process and how we manage our development life cycle.
So let me ask you a question about the profitability thing, because this is something that Brian and I debated internally when we were trying to figure out what stage 4 for profitability should look like. And many people argue that it's incremental revenue and that's the, the end all be all, and everybody wants to be doing incremental revenue. We don't agree with that, which is why we did not put it in there. But do you get some of that internally too? Do you have some people saying, oh, digital is no good unless it really brings new revenue as an incremental revenue? If you're just shifting from one channel to the other, that's not good enough. Now, we disagree with that strongly, but did you have those debates internally?
We do. We actually did look at this a couple of years ago and looked at what terms and conditions we were applying to different purchasing channels. And that was kind of, we took a step back and said, you know what, we do see some of our customers taking advantage of that. And so we don't really look at incremental revenue as much either, because we really want to service the customer however they want to purchase. If that means that they would rather purchase through our customer service team, then so be it. So we kind of like leveled the terms and conditions and the incentives for each channel so that we could, see where the sales were coming through the most. Now, I think there are a lot of efficiencies with digital and e-commerce in itself. And really, even EDI is something where we try to drive a lot more of our customers to. But, it comes down to there are some complicated processes and things like that. So we are looking at overall sales, sometimes incremental, but it really comes down to just the growth within overall as a company. And so we're not kind of pinpointing it so much on just a particular channel.
Okay. So let's talk quickly about your senior digital leader and the team. Are you the senior digital leader, first of all?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't give yourself a 4 for that?
Well, because we do have a C-suite and I'm not actually in that. But, as being a medium-sized company too, we are very close and we talk a lot. And, so I've had many really good conversations with our team this year. And this was actually one. So this assessment came out at the right time in the right place, because I had already actually gone through several other assessments and none of them, I think, were as good by far. And none of them were even focused on B2B. So, like Ashley mentioned earlier, it's prescriptive. And I really liked that about what you guys have developed and created. I did my own kind of work in exporting and making an Excel doc and putting some weights on it and some impact priorities as far as where I thought we kind of could focus on as a business, and to kind of bring out some of those things of higher importance with the rest of our team. And then I had our team also look through it and go through and rescore or debate so we could have a conversation around it too. So, and I think more or less we were all aligned from a leadership level standpoint, but there were a few areas where we maybe had some disagreements, but I think those were really great discussion points. So
Ashley, I'm going to bring you in a second, but I got to ask, to this disagreement and the big matzo ball sitting right in front of us, what's this 1.5? I mean, did you you couldn't decide on 1 versus 2?
The reason why is because we on my team have been really focused on developing digital tools that enable our sales team in our B2B buying process, right? And so there has been some really good adoption there. There are some tools and technology where there is a lot of resistance, and partially because we have a legacy system and haven't been enabling it or enhancing the features of it. And so we don't get as much out of, for example, our CRM. And that is a huge tool and resource for data that I think personally is a gap in our process and business. And so I think there are some tools and technologies that we've done very well at getting user adoption and rolling things out and doing a good job from a change management standpoint. And actually, that's one thing that came out of this discussion that I should mention is after we had some discussions around digital transformation and going through this assessment, we actually created and change management digital AI kind of team that is going to be meeting regularly now based on just kind of, we've got some legacy systems we're probably going to be upgrading soon. So that was a really good thing and an outcome from this.
So who's chairing that committee?
Myself and the IT, someone from IT, someone from finance. So we have a kind of good cross-collaborative group that will report up to leadership and bring some new ideas and change management thought process.
Well, always bring the finance people in, because
yeah,
people pay attention to the money.
Yeah.
You show the money, as Tom Cruise family we said, if you show me the money, you'll get somebody's attention. So
yes,
well, that's great. Well, Ashley, what are you seeing? I mean, obviously you guys are a solution provider, you sell technology, but ain't no technology going to get adopted if there's not people infrastructure in place. But how has that impacted or intersected what you guys do?
Yeah, and I mean, really, we come from a composable e-commerce architecture. So even as Teresa was talking about with her current architecture and setup, it really does enable teams. And I also just have to give you a shout out, though. I love a good workbook, and seeing that this report was able to help your teams collaborate, I think shows really well, and it's really starting these conversations. So change management's hard, and I'm at the core part of this with a lot of our customers today. B2B also brings on complex business use cases, and it's really just all about starting small and honestly just starting the conversation. So enabling your teams to be digital and giving them the tools they need to make that happen.
So Teresa, final question for you.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10,
10.5.
we'll give you
10.5.
How deeply involved is the C-suite in digital at Ergodyne? 10 being there every day, following you very closely, and 1 being not really engaged.
Honestly, that's where I think we have been very fortunate in our business, that the C-suite, it's not a maybe super intentional built into our overall company like goals and strategies, but it is fundamentally been a part of our approach and our process. So I would rate us at an 8.5, just because I think that part of my conversation is to bring it up at a higher level and to really look at it across the company and all teams, especially with AI and, the technology advances that are going to be coming so fast. So that was part of my intention with this, is to get the conversation started, but really to kind of bring it up and be thinking about it at the forefront too, in all parts of our business.
Excellent. Well, Teresa, thanks so much for joining us today. That was really insightful, and you get the first person to put a 0.5 on there, so
Right.
you always
Thank
you. Memorable for that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Maverick. It was awesome to have you, and thanks again for joining us. So, Andy, we're going to move on to our next one in just a moment. But in terms of the what I thought, and Ashley too, I love that this was practical for her, that she was able to identify areas where there were specific needs, and that she was able to act on it. What's fascinating to me is the sales team stuff. It's still there, Andy. Your whole death of a salesperson from 6 years ago, whenever that was, there's still this tension, and it's just doesn't seem to want to go away. And maybe a whole swath of people have to retire. I don't know.
And I have no issues with salespeople, and the ones who recognize that sales enablement will make them more productive and make them more money are the smart ones. The challenge is there are just a lot of them that were creatures of habit as humans. And we've fallen into this thing where if I don't go see my client today and ask them how everything's going, then what am I supposed to do? I've literally had people tell me when I was doing the research from 7 years ago, they didn't know what the salespeople were going to do all day long. Like wow. if they didn't
really
go out and visit clients and ask them questions, they didn't know what to do. And so they had to retrain salespeople to think differently. Like, hey, my job is to drive demand. It's not to ingratiate myself with my client unless it drives demand, right? I mean, so Ashley, obviously you've seen this too, right? I mean, you guys have tools for sales enablement. I'm sure it varies across industries, but I mean, are you seeing people starting to get on board with that?
They are. It's definitely a mind shift change, and it can come slowly. Again, I think across the board, it doesn't happen overnight. I think having enablers on the team and finding those core internal people that can help drive the change and prove that there's trust and confidence in it is really what ends up enabling it faster.
Yeah. Sweet G just chimed in here, by the way. Thank you, Sweet G. He says, Zorro has 0 salespeople. Happy emoji. So, yes, Andy, we know that you are a digital first organization. No, thank you. Keep the comments coming. And it's interesting. Yeah. When you're $1 billion company with no sales folks. So, obviously different model. So, all right, we got to move on to our next dimension. Dimension 3. Had to wait for
We're in the third dimension now. We're heading for the fourth dimension.
That's right. We're heading for the fourth
dimension.
Andy, you're gonna host this one, I think. Customer experience. How much is the organization focusing on creating functionality experiences that meets the demands of the customer? Jeff Bezos once said, Andy, Ashley, we're going to be the world's most customer-centric company. And they've done that. And they've obviously, there's something to that, right? So this isn't the tools necessarily, but this is the customer experience you're delivering, and the tools are enabling it. Anyway, Andy, we have a special guest here too. You want to go ahead and introduce the topic and our guest?
Yeah, so customer experience, let's bring them in. It's Pekka, all the way from Finland. And I got to meet Pekka, gosh, what was it, about a year ago or so? I was doing some research for my report, and we ended up striking up a conversation, had a good one. And we gave you a good nickname too. It's Pekka, give him Helsinki, because he's from Helsinki, Finland.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no,
to be
thanks
here.
for being here. So tell us quickly what Normet does.
Yeah, so Normet is a manufacturing company for mining and tunneling industry. So we manufacture equipment, but also actually the bigger part of business is the aftermarket. So services, parts, consumables, and there the e-commerce helps, of course.
Yeah, good point about that. It often gets lost in the discussion, especially in B2B, where companies go, what do they do? I mean, they're not selling $1 million devices online, and they may or may not be, but your shows how selling replacement parts, aftermarket supplies. In some cases, those markets are as big, if not bigger, than the primary market, right?
Exactly. And actually, the services part is bigger than the equipment part in our case. So typically, our customers use the equipment really heavily. So we need to be able to provide the parts and services on that. But actually, over the past few years, Normet has undergone a remarkable shift in the new digital opportunities. So rather than viewing them as risks or cost sinks, we've recognized that there's a lot of opportunities for innovation and growth, and this being one of the areas.
Well, so let's go to your scores, because your scores are kind of interesting. So you ended up being in a stage 2. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here, but I think it's very important to know where you stand so you don't overestimate your capability or underestimate your capability. So again, no right or wrong answer here. So you scored a 13. Looks like you've got, some plans ahead, some work to do here. But, I know from when we talked earlier, you were saying that you did pretty well around ordering and reordering, and putting e-commerce in place has actually helped you with call deflection, and that some of the customers onboarded themselves because they discovered that you had this on their own. I mean, that rarely happens, but that shows you the power of digital. It's like, hey, it's out there. People might find it on their own.
Yeah, true. Also, well, actually in the scores, you can also see that there's a couple of 3s, and we have already ongoing projects even to improve those. So whether we are talking about predictive models or the bigger digital portfolio, we have connected equipment and we get data from the fleet, and we can provide insights to our customers based on their specific needs, and we are moving towards the predictive part. So we are really good on those areas. But then there's gaps, as you can see.
Well, let's talk about one of the gaps. Let's skip Amazon, because Amazon's not a big player in the mining industry right now. So I think that's probably, but they used to say that about every other category.
You never know.
So you never know.
Right.
But let's talk about chat functionality for a moment. So what do you have and what do you want to have for chat?
To be honest, we don't have anything at the moment. We do have a customer-centric experience in the way that we have their fleet. We know what they are running. We know what they should be expecting from the parts side. But we have, at this point, 0 assistive functions. We have no chat or anything that we could support real-time their experience on the side. And this was actually quite eye-opening for me to do the model as well, because we've been focusing so much on certain parts that, hey, maybe we should think about other functions and features as well. So in that sense, doing the maturity model is excellent stuff.
So why do you think you don't have that assistive feature? Is it because you don't have like an outside in view? I mean, a lot of companies are inside out, right? They start with what do we have
we are
processes.
yeah
Is that
we
you?
are, but also maybe the first pain points or the loudest pain points have been that the customers want to see the offering based on their needs, and now we have it, but maybe now we are entering the stage that we need to support the customer even more, assist when they are on the side, when they have problems, and we haven't got the solution for that yet. The other part is the payments. We are more or less like it's a closed e-commerce site. We have invoice only. I don't even know is the credit card option. We are global, and credit cards are mostly used. I think in the Americas, if we think about Asia Pacific or something, it's not needed there at this point. It's a business to business or invoice from business to business. But we have a lot of bigger enterprise customers, and they are demanding, for example, punch outs. So we need to explore those options as well. How do we have features for our bigger enterprise customers? And I don't know, does it go for the channels or the payments part, but definitely it goes for the customer experience.
Well, and actually in the credit card thing maybe is more sort of, North America centric, but I think maximum flexibility around all sorts of payments is really critical, because at some point, people are going to use an Apple Pay to be doing this stuff. At some point, we're not there yet, but you have to be able to offer more than just invoicing, because invoicing obviously is time consuming, and it requires, it's a barrier to entry. Like say somebody wants to buy something, and let's say they can't arrange the internal purchasing for it, but they do have money for it, then it becomes a barrier. Again, this is all just friction, right? And this is your role, isn't it, to just remove friction?
Correct, definitely. I will also say that we have experienced that many of our customers have their internal roadblocks as well. Mm-hmm. We would have quite a nice service, but their procurement processes are so outdated that they can't do the purchasing part, and this is what we are battling as well at this point.
No, I think that's a really great point. So Ashley, what have you seen here in terms of how customer experience is affecting what tools people are going to be buying? I mean, obviously, Pekka's made the point that they were a little bit behind on certain areas, maybe some of the sales enablement, assistive things, but what are you seeing? Are people changing the tools they're asking for you to deliver because they want to upgrade their customer experience dramatically?
Yeah, I think one thing that Pekka said, thinking about your customers who you're working with, you really need to be intentional and thoughtful about the changes you're making. And just because it's working for one organization or it's the new technology that's out doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for your business at this point in time. So I think what we find is that most of our customers are coming to us with customer experience at the top of the mind, but they just really want to know how to fix something that isn't working or that they get feedback on so that they can deliver functionalities that are truly going to make their lives easier and easier for them to spend money with companies. So it's the ability to be able to deliver quickly and efficiently, and having a supportive architecture under that to allow you to be flexible, scalable, and take some of those risks without it taking up too much time or money or resources or contracts for that matter.
Yeah, so before we let you go, Pekka, a quick question for you. If you could snap your fingers and make one thing appear today that's going to take maybe years for you to produce to enhance that customer experience, what would it be?
Better predictive models still. We are working on, but we need to have the system or features in place that we know what the customer wants to buy already today, or today what they want to buy tomorrow.
Yeah, good answer. Okay. Well, hey, Pekka, thanks so much for joining us today all the way from Finland. It's getting late there, so thank you for staying up late. Really appreciate it. Great having you.
Have a beer. Give him Helsinki, not Helsinki. Thank you, Pekka. All right. Well, that was an interesting conversation with Pekka. Third dimension is so important to customer experience, right? And what was interesting to me about that is also kind of as we think about, one of those quadrants there, Andy, Ashley, was about introducing new lines of business. And I've seen companies that are down the path that have a flexible structure, something that they can, turn on a dime and be nimble with. They can do things like introduce all new, lines. I hear a lot from companies about introducing services and solutions versus just selling product. And this applies to distributors and manufacturers. I have an example case study in my book, Bosch Tools, Robert Bosch Tools. They introduced a whole series of services attached to their equipment and matching labor to equipment in the field and making their labor for their customers who are contractors more efficient, in their own operations. And they now sell this as a whole new service line for Bosch. They sell this solution. It all has to do with asset tracking and things, but it's a fascinating thing when you get down the path, what that opens up for you in these different areas. But you have to have obviously an infrastructure to support it. Any thoughts, guys?
Yeah, Ashley, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is truly remarkable how knowing that you can quickly make decisions like that and try new services, as long as you're intentional about it. It doesn't matter how many tools you bring into your box. You really just want to make it something that's going to be bringing value. And you don't want to waste a lot of time to find that out if it was a test for a new channel or a new business line.
Well, I think, and taking a page from Amazon's book too, testing and learning is also important, right? Andy, go ahead, and then we got to get to our next dimension.
This services thing is real. I mean, Pekka mentioned themselves, so they're doing pretty well in that regard. I think there are a whole bunch of industrial manufacturers whose models in the next 10 to 20 years are going to completely shift. They're going to shift away from making their margin, their profit off of selling a tool, an item, a device, what have you. Not to say they can't make money off of that, but it's going to be what data that produces. It's going to be what services arise out of that. Because the other thing about it is it gives you a monopoly.
Right.
It's your own system. Whereas they're competing with 10 other companies to sell that product.
That's right.
It almost makes sense to give the product away for free. I'm sure this is heresy, but give the product away for free and use it as an instrument or a conduit for collecting data, and then sell services, proprietary services on top of that. That's where the high margin is. And services always do better than products do when it comes to.
We gotta leave it there because we got to get to our next dimension. All right. It's time for Dimension 4. Anyway, our next dimension is about data and insights. Okay. How much is the organization investing in putting data into the hands of business users so they can make data-driven decisions about investments? And boy, do we have a whopper of a special guest here on this topic. Let's go ahead and introduce Mr. Girish, the Silencer Sahukar, who is the Vice President of Digital at Dawn Foods. He is a return guest. He was a debate contender, someone who I think won multiple times, right, Girish? Did you win? Yeah. And he's with Dawn Foods, and they're using data in all kinds of ways. We're going to find out in just a moment. Welcome. Tell us what Dawn does and what you do, Mr. Girish.
Thanks, guys. Great to be back. I think this is the last appearance that fulfills the requirement for a Letterman jacket. So expect that.
Sure. Well, we'll ship that right to you. Yep. So what do you do, Mr.
Dawn Foods is a baking ingredients manufacturer and distributor. We've been around for 103 years. We make things like cake mixes, donut mixes, filling, icing, glazing, and distribute that through our network.
And you're a tiny little company.
We're a very small company.
Yeah, like with billions of sales. Okay, so we're going to talk about data and insights. Let's start with your scores, Mr. Silencer. What do we have here? So you got a 14. You're a stage 2. What have you been doing?
Well, you guys put this up as the fourth dimension. It's really hard to explain what the fourth dimension is, much less understand and grasp and get it ready, right? That's where data is, right? I think you write in your report that data is not a messy or not a clean. For the most part, it's fairly messy everywhere. And that's the case within our company. We don't have great clean data, and this is a multi-year journey that you go on to clean up your data, get to a better situation than where you are.
And I'm imagining you have some great tools in place. So your other I'd imagine your tools are way up there, right? You get a nice high score there, but then we're talking about data analytics, KPIs, things like that. Let's start by taking the one that, in fact, you scored highest at. Well, there's two, but using AI tools to enhance data, right? Why'd you earn a 3 there? What are you doing there? And that's such a hot topic, Girish. What are you doing with AI?
Yeah, we're leveraging the power of AI in multiple areas. We're getting better with our demand planning and forecasting. How we are applying the data we have from our sales to plan and forecast what we need to do in the future helps all the way back to the factory floor in terms of what do we need to manufacture, when do we need to manufacture it, where do we need to manufacture it? That's the most critical part, right? You can manufacture something anywhere you want in our network, but it needs to be closest to the customer so that you can fulfill it as quickly as you can, so it doesn't sit in our warehouse. Those are the areas where we're applying AI right now. We're also applying AI and some machine learning models to think about and to recommend what products does this customer want on this visit to the website. Those needs can change from visit to visit. So how do you make sure from a session to session, you're not recommending the same things? They're taking into account what they've done and what predictively they might be intending to do. So, grabbing all that data on their activity, on their experience, and what they've done in the past, what transactions they've done in the past to predict the future.
And that ties into your external feedback loop too, right? Which is your other one you scored a 3 on. Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah, and it also includes some qualitative and quantitative voice of customer feedback in that loop. We've got a pretty robust voice of customer feedback program. We've got a great insights team, and we're always listening to our customers, both internally and externally, to develop all that.
And for the folks listening in here, I know, Girish, I know your business because we spent some time together. I mean, listen, these guys are doing a phenomenal job. I mean, you've got over 50% of your revenue coming from e-commerce. This is, I think you scored yourself honestly here, Girish. When you're looking at where do you have opportunities, let's talk about that for a moment. KPIs. So you're using AI, but then you've got KPIs and you got state of your data both at one. What's the delta there? Explain that.
Yeah, when you think about KPIs, we're still measuring e-commerce the same way as we would measure our offline business.
Okay.
Right. So we have to value the digital aspects of our business differently than our offline business, because there's no data there. There's no insights. There's no predictive nature to that offline business. We don't really know how to measure them, and we have some ideas, but until we start measuring them and start to put those as KPIs, we typically tend to have a hypothesis, go measure it out, and see what happens. And then over time, when we feel confident about a metric, we make that a KPI, saying here's where we are, here's what we've done to measure this, and come to this baseline number, and here's where we need to go. For a while, we did not measure what our on time and full fulfillment rate was. We took a stab at it over 2 years, and now we have a KPI around that metric. Once we defined the KPI, we then had to go figure out how do we go and deliver against that KPI, and we then put our team in motion to go achieve the goal.
I think you're too hard on yourself on this one, to be honest with you, Girish. I think you should be a 2 on KPIs. That's just my take.
We'll get there.
I think I do. You guys are thinking about it the right way, though. And I know it's a lot of omni-channel stuff you have to get through in alignment. But so Ashley, what are you seeing in your business, with your customers? How are they using data and insights in this? I mean, do they score like this? Are you seeing this kind of mix of scores across your customers?
I'd say the data and insights is probably one of the most important and also difficult dimensions for our customers.
Right.
Even from an implementation standpoint, it's looking at, first of all, where is our data? How good is it? Where did it come from? And then also, how do we get it into and integrate with other systems so that we can do something fruitful with it? And based on that, have the time and the resources to be able to analyze it and really determine what things to say yes to. And sometimes you make more money by saying no to some projects. And without that solid data underneath, it's hard. And then also being able to have, from a composable commerce standpoint, we see that our clients are really able to test out some of their theories or hypotheses on this and do it in a safe way where it doesn't have to be in a major market. See how it works, see if it's matching the minimum KPIs, and then push it forward to the rest of the business.
All right. Well, I think for time's sake, we have to leave it there. Mr. Silencer Sahukar, thank you very much for your input. It was very helpful. You did not stay silent on this one. We appreciate that. We've got to wrap on a few things here. We've got a couple things we want to share with you, but Girish, thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take
Awesome.
care.
Thanks for joining us. All righty. So I think we've got just a kind of some closing statements here. So time for a couple minutes for some final thoughts. Ashley, what did you think of all this? Why don't you give us a kind of a summary of what you heard? What did you take away from this conversation?
I think really the common denominator here is every single panelist mentioned something about always thinking about it from the customer perspectives first. And you can have all the tools in the world, but you know your business best. So I think setting yourself up for success with easy integrations, a solid base, and knowing the right questions to ask your teams and giving them the resources to be able to implement them is really important. If you don't do thoughtful things, the service and business that you offer doesn't matter to your customers.
Amen on putting the customer first, and that's led to so much success. Well, Ashley, we've enjoyed co-hosting with you today. Thank you for joining, and thank you for partnering with us in this important work. You can see that it's been very impactful for these practitioners. So we think giving them a great tool, and it's a lot of it's due to your support. So thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Ashley.
Of course. All right. And any final thoughts? You got about a minute left here before we wrap up. Any final thoughts?
Just that it feels like there's no right or wrong answer. It depends on where you are in your journey. Some companies that are digitally native are going to be farther along, but even really sophisticated, well-run, well-managed companies like Dawn Foods are still struggling with data and insights. And that's the one of all of them that we see is the underperformer, the under-indexer. But it really is the case that everybody's got improvement to make someplace, but you really need to know where you stand if you're going to make the right investment choices. And that's why we did this maturity model, which frankly, it exceeded my expectations. To hear people say that, we didn't tell Teresa to say that. She told us that.
Right.
People are telling us this is the one actionable thing we've seen in the B2B commerce space. And so that makes me feel good.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. And I'd love we could talk about this for hours, guys, but this webcast today will be available on demand for anybody who want to rewatch it or share it with your friends and family across the galaxy. And we will see you next time on the Master B2B webcast or one of our upcoming events. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks,
everybody.